Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making pulled pork, but we're substituting the pork with jackfruit to make it vegetarian. I don't know who the first person was that saw this alien egg and thought, let's crack this open and see if it's edible, but I'm really glad they did. Now we're using canned jackfruit, and if you're using this, make sure you get the one that's in brine or water and not syrup. Now to start this dish, we're going to make a dressing for our coleslaw to top our pulled pork. So to a half cup of mayonnaise, I've added 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, a half of a teaspoon of celery seeds, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a half of a teaspoon of kosher salt, and a half of a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Mix this together until all those ingredients are really well incorporated. This is a super simple dressing for coleslaw. Now we're going to give this a taste and adjust seasoning if it's needed. Now I have a half of a cabbage here. You can use red or green, whatever you have on hand. I'm just chopping this up into manageable chunks, and then we're going to thinly shred this. You could definitely do this in a food processor if you prefer, but I am doing it by hand, and it should kind of look like this. And we're going to pop that into a bowl once it's all cut up. Now I have a piece of parchment that I'm going to place my box grater over, and I'm going to grate one of our carrots. We're going to julienne the other one because we want different textures in our slaw. The parchment just makes it easier to transfer over to our bowl. Now the easiest way I found to julienne carrots is take your carrot, cut it on the bias into thin discs. Just be careful when you get to the end, and watch your fingers. Then we're going to take those discs, lay them flat, and cut them into matchsticks. I switched bowls here because I really love to do dishes. Actually, no, I just realized that bowl was going to be much too small for all of our ingredients. So I have a 1/4 cup of parsley leaves, and I'm super excited to use this Mercer Tools Mezzaluna. I purchased this a couple of days ago, and I've been dying to try it, and it works really, really well. We're going to add that to all of our vegetables. And then we're going to add in half of our dressing. The thing about dressing slaw or salad is you can always add more. Once you overdress it, you can't take it away. So just add this in increments because you don't really want a soggy coleslaw. You still want some crunch in there. So add a little bit more dressing if you need to. Toss this around, and we're going to cover this and set this in the fridge for an hour. Now let's move on to our homemade BBQ sauce. Could you buy a bottled one? Absolutely, but you can't control the sweetness or the salinity of a bottled product. So I have 2 cloves of garlic that I'm just chopping up into a nice fine mince, and I'm going to add those to a bowl. I'm popping up a list here because there's a lot of ingredients. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 1/4 teaspoons of dried mustard, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard, a half of a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar, a 1/4 cup of water, and a half of a cup of brown sugar. You can add or take away as much as you want to adjust the sweetness of your homemade sauce. We're going to give this a little stir just to start that sugar dissolving. And last but not least, we're going to add 3/4 cup of ketchup. We're going to give this a really good mix until all that sugar is dissolved. I know a lot of barbecue sauces are cooked, but we are cooking this straight in with our jackfruit. So we're just going to mix this and pop this in the fridge until we're ready to use it. Now I have 3 20-ounce cans of jackfruit that I've drained and rinsed, and I've set aside to dry. But there's still a lot of water retained in these pieces, so I'm going to squeeze that excess water out over a bowl and just start shredding this into a separate bowl. And it's amazing how much this looks like pulled pork once you shred it. And try to keep your sizes a little random. You want larger chunks and thinner chunks, just like a real pulled pork would be. Now add all of that to a large bowl. Into this, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, a half of a teaspoon of kosher salt, and a pinch of cinnamon, which may sound odd, but it's going to add a different type of heat to your mixture. Give this a good stir until everything is really well coated. And the lovely thing about using jackfruit is that you can taste it at this point to adjust your seasoning. You can add more salt if you need it. You can add a little bit more cumin. You want to adjust this to what your flavor profile of barbecue tastes like. Now I have 1 medium onion that I'm just chopping up into a nice even dice. I know there's an easier way by keeping the root end on to do this, but the root end of my onion wasn't looking so hot, and I wanted to utilize as much of this alum as possible because I didn't want anything to go to waste. So once we have that all nicely chopped up, we're going to add this to a bowl and set this aside while we prep our last 2 ingredients. Now I have 3 cloves of garlic as well as 1 jalapeno, and we're just going to mince up our garlic into a nice fine mince, and we're going to pop this into a bowl. Now for the jalapeno, I'm just going to chop off that stem, cut this into quarters, and I'm keeping the ribs and the seeds in because I like that heat. You can definitely remove those if you don't like that much spiciness in your dish. So we're just going to chop this up and add this to the same bowl as our garlic since it's going in at the same time. Now let's move over to the stove. Over medium heat, I am breaking in my brand new Alclad pan. My sister got me a beautifully generous gift certificate to Williams-Sonoma for my birthday, and this was one of my purchases. But I digress. So I've added 1 tablespoon of olive oil, added in all of our onions, and we're going to let this saute for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we're going to add in our garlic and jalapeno and just saute this pretty quickly for only about a minute. Next goes in all of our shredded jackfruit. And we're going to let this saute and cook for 5 minutes, and you're going to start noticing that some of this will start sticking to the bottom of your pan, and that ends up being crispy, which is kind of what you get in pulled pork anyway, so you definitely want those little crispy bits in this. If you find that your jackfruit is sticking too much, just add in about a tablespoon of water. Give this a little stir and scrape up any of those bits on the bottom. It really smells delicious in my kitchen while I'm cooking this. So after 5 minutes, we're going to add in half of our barbecue sauce. We're just going to swirl this around, make sure everything is coated, and we're going to pop a lid on this and cook this for half of an hour. I just realized that if you were using bottled sauce and pre-made coleslaw, this whole meal would only take you a half an hour from start to finish, which is perfect for a busy weeknight. But again, we're going to stir this around, make sure everything is coated, pop a lid on this, and let it cook over medium heat for half of an hour. After a half an hour, we're going to take off the lid, turn off the heat, and add in the remaining barbecue sauce. Give this a nice quick stir, and then we'll be ready to plate our dish. Oh, also at this point, taste and season. If you need to add more salt and pepper, you can do that now. And now we're ready to assemble. So I've just toasted a brioche sesame bun here. You always want to toast your buns. It adds a depth of flavor and just makes it that much better. Next, we're going to heap on a generous helping of our jackfruit. Top this off with as much or as little coleslaw as you'd like. Pop the top on, and that's it. Dinner is done. Let's cut this in half to make it a little easier to eat and so we can look at the cross section. Now let's give this a taste. The jackfruit has absorbed all of that barbecue sauce that it's cooked in. There's a tanginess and sweetness. The coleslaw adds a crunch and a creaminess that's the perfect counterbalance. And it's lovely to have that crunchy texture along with that soft pulled jackfruit. This is really everything that barbecue should be. There it is. Pulled pork using jackfruit. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thanks again, and until next time, happy cooking. This is the not so fun part about cooking. We end up washing and drying dishes 90% of the time.